What is going on YouTube? It's your boy Arbo, and we are back today with another reaction video. I know it's been a while, I understand, and I apologize. I know I said we were going to get back to a regular schedule, and then I kind of drifted off again. The reason for that is because I was just having some reservations and thoughts about whether or not I wanted to continue with making videos, period, not just reaction videos, but just any kind of content. So that's why you may have seen not much activity on my social media platforms. If you have my TikTok, if you have my Instagram, you may see that I have barely posted any videos or any kind of content really outside of maybe a couple of things. But that was all due to me just trying to find a direction and a thought on what I want to do. But I just decided that I'm going to continue to do the videos just out of fun, especially the reaction videos. I'm enjoying doing them, and hopefully that you guys are checking them out. Hopefully you guys are enjoying them. So that's going to be the plan for now. Obviously not a full-time YouTuber, so I have to make the best of my time, but I'm going to do what I can to get some videos out on a regular basis and just enjoy the process. With that being said, thank you guys for watching. Thank you guys for all the love and support. Thank you guys for all the constructive criticism that helps me make my content better for you guys. I don't want to waste anyone's time or disrespect anybody's time by putting out half SSA content. So I appreciate you guys that kind of reach out and let me know when things aren't right. Volumes are too low, volumes are too high. That helps me to figure out what I need to do to make the videos better for you guys and make the content better. So thank you for that. Also, thank you for the new subscribers. We finally hit over 100 subscribers. So for me, that was kind of fun to see. I know for most people, you may be thinking 100 isn't a lot, but hey, it's a lot to me. So thank you guys for all the love and support, and hope you guys enjoyed this video. Now, so the video we're reacting to is going to be called Top 2 Stories That Sound Fake But Are 100% True. This intro, I should say, is after I watched the videos, and this is probably, honestly, maybe top. I'm gonna say, and this could be just recency bias, I'm gonna say it's probably the best one that I've done a reaction to so far. If you haven't seen this video, it's a good one. That's all I'm gonna say. It's very good, and I really enjoyed reacting to this. I enjoyed the video as much as I did. Like I said, this is probably the best, and like I also said, this could just be recency bias, but I personally think this may be the best video that I've reacted to so far. So hope you guys enjoyed the video as much as I did. God bless, and thank you again for all the supporters and hitting 100 subscribers. I appreciate y'all. Love y'all very much. And without further ado, let's get into it, baby.
Sometimes the truth is stranger than fiction, and today I'm going to share 2 stories that demonstrate that. But before we get into those stories, if you're a fan of the strange, dark, and mysterious delivered in story format, then you've come to the right place, because that's all we do, and we upload once a week. So if that's of interest to you, the next time the like button leaves their phone out unattended, go ahead and pick it up and spam passwords over and over again until it locks them out of their phone for a week. Also, please subscribe to our channel and turn on all notifications so you don't miss any of our weekly uploads. Okay, let's get into today's stories.
Hey. All right, you're across.
At around 8 p.m. on December 16th, 2023, a 31-year-old man named Nestor Flores was driving down a highway just outside of Dallas, Texas, with both his hands tightly gripping the steering wheel. Nestor was very stressed out on this ride. All he wanted to do was get home, because he was worried that on this ride, he might get pulled over by police. I mean, this was a route he had driven a bunch, and he knew there were loads of state troopers that patrolled the area. And from his perspective, it seemed like they kind of pulled people over all the time. And Nestor had spent the night out with a couple of friends, and he had had a couple of drinks. You know, he didn't feel he had had too much.
That boy must be in Florida. State troopers on the road. Boy, them state troopers in Florida on that turnpike. Them boys act like they be desperate for a ticket. Good Lord. them boys are stack up on top of each other to try to get a ticket. Lord, Them in Georgia too. Them boys in Georgia, but Mississippi. Oh my God, Mississippi boy, they be. Oh Lord Jesus, I hate driving from Florida to Texas and back. Louisiana, Mississippi, Alabama sometimes, but that Louisiana, Mississippi boy, goodness gracious, they just park anywhere.
To where he couldn't drive, but he knew if he did get pulled over, he could be in trouble. And then on top of that, in the back of Nestor's mind was the fact that he had had a couple of minor run-ins with the law over the past couple of years, and so he kind of had this fear of police already, and also Nestor was not born in America, and so he was worried that on top of all that, if he got pulled over, he could risk being deported. And so on whole, Nestor just does not want to see any police officer. He just wants to get home and go to bed. And so as Nestor is doing his best to not draw any suspicion to himself and is trying to follow all the rules of the road, he decides to have a sip of his Diet Coke. And his Diet Coke was right in the middle console. And so as he's driving eyes straight ahead, he reaches down and he grabs the Coke, he pulls it up, he uncaps it, takes a sip. But then as he puts the drink back down, again, he's keeping his eyes on the road, he hits something with the drink. And he feels the drink slosh out of his cup and it hits his hand. And instinctively, he took his eyes off the road and looked down at the Coke, and he managed to put the drink back in its cup holder. And then when he brought his eyes back to the road, there was a deer in the middle of the road. He was too close to swerve out of the way, and so at full speed he smashes into this deer. The deer hits his front windshield and basically caves in the passenger side windshield and flips up and over the back of his car. And Nestor amazingly was composed enough to not swerve wildly post-impact, because he knew if he did that he could run into oncoming traffic or something. And so he just kept on going straight and gradually slowed down and pulled off the side of the road. And as he did, he looked over his shoulder, seeing if this deer was basically lying in the road, or even worse, maybe it hit some other car. But when he looked over his shoulder, the road was clear. There was no deer. Now, even though Nestor was
if that's them deers, boy, them deers ain't no good. They tear up your car like that. They just get up and run off. Oh, man. I'm sorry, I shouldn't be laughing because it's a serious situation. I know a lot of people deal with it, but man, that would piss me off. To just smack into a deer, your car is just completely totaled, and then you turn around and the deer just takes off running. Wait, no, it's like, bro, man, if you don't get back here, at least be dinner or something. Sorry for
obviously very shaken up at this point. I mean, he just had this horrible car accident with this deer, and he's already on edge about getting pulled over by police. But for the moment, it was just peaceful on the highway. No cops were coming up to him, and he's pulled over to the side. Physically he was okay. It seemed like the deer was okay. It clearly ran off the road or something. And there was damage to his car. I mean, the deer really smashed in the front of his car, and the windshield, especially on the passenger side, was basically caved in. But Nestor was able to see through his side of the windshield, and when he put the car back in drive and hit the gas, the car seemed to drive just fine. And so even though Nestor felt kind of bad that he had smashed this deer, he thought, what am I going to do? Go find the deer and make sure it's okay? Like, he can't really do anything. It's nighttime.
Look for Bambi,
so he made the decision that, nobody saw this, and it seems like everything's okay, so I'm just going to drive home, and I'll take care of my car tomorrow. But after driving 38 more miles from the impact site, Nestor's car began making this horrible rattling sound from the engine, and also smoke began to billow up out of the front of his car. And so Nestor knew, this is so conspicuous, he's gonna get pulled over if he doesn't stop. And so feeling really annoyed, because he was actually pretty close to home at this point, Nestor pulled off the highway and came to a stop in a parking lot of a fast food restaurant. And so at first, all Nestor did was just turn off his car and wait for a couple of minutes in hopes that, that would be enough to cure his car. But after a couple of minutes, the smoke continued to billow out of his car, and then when he tried to turn it back on again, the car simply wouldn't start. And so at this point, Nestor knew he had to call a tow truck. But when he reached for his phone was dead, and he didn't have a phone charger in his car, and so he's like, great, I can't even call a tow truck. But then he looked up and saw the fast food restaurant was open, and he decided he would just go in there, and he would ask one of them if they had a charger. So Nestor gets out of his smoking car, he walks into the restaurant, he goes up to the counter, and he asks the person behind the counter, like, hey, my phone's dead, do you have a charger? Do you mind charging my phone? But the employee, they didn't say anything back to Nestor. They just stood there with their mouths open and their eyes wide, staring at Nestor, like they couldn't believe what they were looking at. And so Nestor's thinking, like, what's wrong with this person? Hey, do you have a charger or not? And the employee, who by this point is pale as a ghost, just shook their head at Nestor, like, no, they don't have a charger. And then they just stood there, still staring at Nestor. And so now Nestor is genuinely just furious. I mean, the whole night has completely derailed here. All he wanted to do was get home, and it's like one horrible thing happens after another. And so Nestor was just like, okay, fine. And he turned around and he left the restaurant and went back to his car, thinking maybe if I search the whole vehicle, there's bound to be a charger in there somewhere. And so Nestor gets back into his car, he climbs into the driver's seat, he shuts the door, and as he begins looking around his car for this charger, he begins to feel really sleepy. And actually, he eventually just kind of leans forward and falls asleep in his car. More than 2 hours later, Nestor woke up to the sound of somebody tapping on his window. And so Nestor groggily turned and looked, and it was like the worst case scenario. It was a police officer who was shining his flashlight into the vehicle, clearly gesturing for Nestor to roll his window down. And so Nestor was totally compliant. He rolled the window down and he looked at the officer. And before Nestor could even say anything, the officer said, "Get out of the car." So Nestor, he gets out of the car and he's thinking to himself, why is he acting so aggressively towards me? Like, what have I done here? And so Nestor, he gets out of the car. And again, before Nestor can ask any questions, the officer just says to Nestor, "What happened tonight? Like, what's going on here?" And so Nestor, he knows his car is jacked up and here he is sleeping in the parking lot. And so he turns to the officer and begins explaining the deer story. He was driving down the road, he hits this deer, it went over the top, he didn't see it, he didn't report it. And as he's telling the officer this, he's thinking, oh my gosh, like, is there a law? Like, if you hit a deer, are you supposed to report it? Is that what's going on? Maybe the deer did die and it was in the middle of the road and somebody saw his license plate and now the cop was here. And so Nestor began to panic, trying to explain the logic behind leaving the deer and how sorry he was. He should have stopped. He should have called the police. But the officer finally just put up his hand, telling Nestor to stop talking. And then the officer took his flashlight and he shined it past Nestor at his car. And when the officer did that, the officer immediately grabbed his radio and began barking orders into it, saying he needed backup. And so Nestor's like, what is going on here? Like, this whole night has been such a disaster. Like, what did I do? And so Nestor, he turned to see what the cop was looking at on his car that would elicit such a big response from him. And when he looked at the passenger seat of his car, where the cop's light was now shining, Nestor froze for a second and then just started to scream. It would turn out that even though Nestor believed he had only had, a few drinks and he was okay to drive, the reality was he was completely annihilated drunk and should never have been behind the wheel. And when he was driving on the highway, anxiously trying to get home, well, he didn't hit a deer. He hit a 45-year-old pedestrian named Terry Ivory, and he hit this guy with so much force that Terry went through the windshield on the passenger side and then landed in the passenger seat, minus one leg, which had been severed on impact.
Oh, wow.
And then Terry's dead body sat there in the passenger seat with Nestor having no idea. He thinks there's a deer back there, but there was never a deer. There's just a dead guy next to him. And Nestor just drove 40 more miles with Terry's dead body next to him. And then when Nestor's car began to smoke and make noises, he pulled off the highway to that fast food restaurant parking lot. And then when he went inside the restaurant to try to get a phone charger, the reason that employee was so shocked to see Nestor and could basically not even speak when Nestor was trying to talk to them was because Nestor was covered practically head to toe in blood, Terry's blood. Now, it's not entirely clear why that employee did not immediately call police, but, after Nestor left the restaurant, went back to his car, and fell asleep, during the time Nestor was sleeping, someone inside the restaurant did call the police, and that's why they showed up and knocked on Nestor's glass. Nestor was charged with collision involving death in December of 2023. However, his case has not yet been adjudicated.
Okay, that's insane.
Earlier this year, we announced our very first Mr.Ballen book.
That's insane. His body was in the car. Like, that is crazy. Now, you hit the man so hard that he became a passenger. And you ain't even, he was pissy drunk. There ain't no way you don't notice somebody that wasn't in your car before sitting in your passenger seat, dead or alive. Man, I feel so bad for that guy's family. That's crazy. That is crazy. All right. The burning question.
On the afternoon of December 15th, 1997, a brand new mother named Luz Cuevas sat on her couch in her little apartment in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, cradling her beautiful 10-day-old baby girl, who she had named Delamar Vera. And in the room with Luce and her daughter were some members of Luce's extended family who had come over to meet the baby. And so for about an hour, the family all took turns, holding the baby and complimenting how cute her little dimples looked. And then eventually the baby started to get fussy, at which point Luce said she was going to take her upstairs and put her to bed. And so Luce brought Delamar upstairs to her nursery, and she put the baby down in her crib, and she stayed with her for a bit until Delamar finally had kind of dozed off to sleep. And so after being sure that her daughter wasn't going to stir, Luce got up and she began making her way towards the door, and right before she left, she made sure to plug in the space heater for her daughter's room to make sure it would stay warm enough while her daughter slept. And then after that, she left the room, shut the nursery door, and went back downstairs to rejoin her family. Luce's family didn't stick around much longer after Luce came downstairs, and after they were all gone, Luce realized she was totally exhausted and her daughter was still fast asleep upstairs, and so Luce decided she would also lie down and try to take a nap herself. But as soon as she closed her eyes, she heard this loud thud sound coming from the second floor. And it sounded like something really heavy had smashed into the ground. And she's thinking, her daughter's up there. Could that be her daughter somehow falling out of the crib or something? And so Luce jumped up, sprinted upstairs. And as she looked down the hall, she could clearly see there was black smoke billowing out of her daughter's nursery. And so Luce charges down the hall. She opens up the door and she looks into her daughter's room, and it's completely engulfed in flames. I mean, everything is on fire, but it's her baby girl in there. And so without any hesitation, Luce charges into the inferno. But when she gets up to the crib, the crib is so completely on fire that when she looks in, she can't even see her daughter. And so in a craze, she begins looking around the room thinking maybe my daughter did fall out of the crib and she's somewhere else in the room, but everything is on fire. She can't see anything. And so as Luce is literally catching on fire and breathing in all the smoke, she's screaming for her daughter. And then a couple of minutes later, firefighters burst into the door and they literally drag Luce out of the nursery. She hasn't found her daughter. She's screaming, where's my baby? But the firefighters, they bring her outside. And just a couple of minutes later, they were able to extinguish this blaze. And after they came out of the house again, they found Luce, who had all these terrible burns in her body, and she's totally messed up from this fire. And they tell her that unfortunately, her daughter was dead. After Delamar's death, Luce's life completely fell apart. I mean, the grief was so immense. It was like she could no longer function in society. I mean, she actually retracted from the world, stopped interacting with people, didn't see her family. She wound up getting a divorce from her husband just over the grief and the sadness of losing this child. I mean, it was like her life basically ended when her daughter's life ended. But on top of that, Luce also felt this incredible sense of guilt because after the fire, the investigators told her that the cause of the fire, although not conclusive, was very likely from that space heater she had plugged in right before she had left the room. And so, of course, Luce is feeling this incredible burden for having potentially killed her daughter, but also she just began to obsess over the details because, again, it wasn't conclusive that it was the space heater. That was their best guess as to what caused the fire. And so Luce began to wonder, was it something else? Was it preventable? What was it? Basically, Luce became completely obsessed with what happened to her daughter. It was the only thing she ever thought of for years.
I understand.
Fast forward to January 24th, 2004. So 6 years.
Can't imagine it. Cannot imagine the pain of losing a child. I really can't. But I completely understand feeling the way she did. Trust me, man. Oh man, I don't know how I would live with myself personally if I felt like I was responsible for my child's death. I really don't. I'm gonna just be honest with you. I don't know how I would react. I really don't. Man, that's so painful. Oh, that's so painful.
Years after the fire. And on this day, Luce was invited to a family party. There was a get-together, and, Luce basically never went to any family function or really left her house much at all. But for some reason, on this day, she decided to go out. And so she goes to this party, and when she gets there, remember, Luce has basically been a recluse for the past 6 years. And so she's not going to immediately start socializing. And so instead, she just goes in the house and kind of finds a spot in the back, kind of away from everybody else who's chatting, and just stands there, kind of people watching. And as she's doing that, something catches her attention off to the side. And when she turns to look at it and sees what it is, she immediately just freezes. 3 days later, Luce walked into the office of a local state legislator, and after saying hello, she sat down, reached into her purse, and pulled out a little plastic bag that contained a folded up napkin. And she slid it across the table to the legislator. And so he picked up the bag and stared at it inquisitively as Luce dove into this wild explanation about what was in this bag and why she was here. And at the end of this totally off-the-wall, insane-sounding story, the legislator was left just kind of staring at Luce and looking back at the bag in total shock. And then finally, after a couple of moments of silence, the legislator just said, "Okay, yeah, I'll see what I can do." It would turn out the fire was not caused by the space heater that Luce had plugged in right before she left her daughter's room. Instead, police believe after Luce came downstairs and tried to take a nap, somebody broke into her apartment, went into the nursery, and set the fire on purpose, but not before abducting the baby. And that person was one of Luce's own family members who had been at her apartment that day celebrating the birth of Delamar Vera. It was Luce's husband's cousin, Carolyn Correa. And in fact, on this same day, before the fire and before the abduction, Carolyn made a point to announce to the whole family that she was pregnant, even though she wasn't. It was just going to be her cover story for why she suddenly had this brand new baby. 6 years later, when Luce was at that family party, well, the thing that caught her attention on the other side of the room was her daughter. She literally saw her daughter, and even though she hadn't seen her in 6 years, she instantly knew it was her because of her distinctive dimples. Now, Luce knew she couldn't just suddenly yell out like, "That's my daughter!" So instead, she came up with this plan. She walked up to the girl and very discreetly said, "Hey, honey, I think you got some gum in your hair." And so as she pretended to pull gum out of the child's hair, she carefully plucked a few strands and put them inside of a napkin and put it inside of her pocket. And then 3 days later, she brought that hair inside of that plastic baggie.
No, she the goat for that. She goated for that. No, she smooth. That this is an insane story, but she is smooth as hell. She's smooth as hell, boy. She played that so smooth. I love that. She said, "That's my baby, but I got to be smart about this." "Oh, come here, baby. Come here. Ooh, look like you got a little bit of gum in your hair. Come here, let me get that for you." Woo!
I like this girl. And basically said, "Here's what I think happened. I think she stole my kid. Can you test it for DNA to prove that girl is my daughter?" And the legislator was like, "Okay, I'll give it a shot." And lo and behold, that hair would prove that girl at the party was her daughter. She did not die in that fire. Carolyn Correa was sentenced to 9 to 30 years in prison for abduction. She originally had an arson charge against her as well, but investigators could not actually prove how the fire started, and so they ultimately dropped those charges. Officials also launched an inquiry into how the fire department had handled the original investigation, because Luce had tried to convince fire officials that, maybe her daughter had not died in the blaze, maybe she was just missing, because when Luce went into the nursery, she claimed she couldn't even find her daughter, but investigators had told her that the fire had burned so hot that basically her daughter had been totally incinerated, and that's why she couldn't find her. In the end, though, because of her refusal to ever give up, Luce was ultimately reunited with her daughter, Delamar.
That is insane, bro.
Okay, so...
Man, and that goes to show you how sometimes you can't even trust your own family. That is crazy. That is crazy. That's crazy. I don't even know what else to say after those stories. That the first one was, the first one was wow, but this one was just mind blowing. Like, it be your own people. That phrase exists for a reason. It really be your own people. Oh man, it really. Oh gosh. That's insane. Anyway, man, I hope y'all enjoyed these stories, man. Mr.Ballen, great storyteller. Y'all know what it is. We love his videos. I love his videos. I do love I love the improved graphics and the backgrounds and stuff. He'll probably never see this reaction video, but if you do and you make it to this part, I love the upgrades. That's all I'm gonna say about that. Hope y'all enjoyed the video. Hope to make more of these soon. I got to get back on the reaction track and just make the videos for fun, not really worry about anything else. I'm enjoying the videos. I enjoy the reaction, so I'm going to just keep doing it because I enjoy it. So hope y'all enjoy the video. Hope y'all enjoy the reaction. Of course, I'll leave the link to the actual video in the description as always. God bless y'all. I love y'all. And y'all stay safe out here. Peace.